Greetings, He fans, and another comic book flip through for you today. This time it is not a vintage comic that has been out of print for ages and is only available digitally or in trade paperbacks. Taking a look at the brand new Masters of the Universe Revelation prequel comic put out by Dark Horse Comics. This is issue number 1 of 4. So there's going to be 4 of these prequel comics, and this fills in the situation leading into the new Netflix Masters of the Universe comic book, the official prequel to the upcoming Netflix animated series. This hit the stands July 7th, and Kevin Smith, the showrunner of the Netflix series, helped write the story for this, so it is canon, it is official, and nice of the comic book shop to provide a bag and board for it. Really beautiful toy artistry on the front here. I've been sharing a lot of classic toy artistry on my Instagram lately, especially by Earl Norem, absolute master when it comes to G.I. Joe, Transformers, and Masters of the Universe artwork. We got Teela, He-Man, Evil-Lyn, Skeletor. If you have to redesign the Iron Cross on He-Man's chest, which they have because, over time certain things take on a different meaning, that is pretty close to the original He-Man Iron Cross. It's pretty hard to notice. So as far as redesigns go, hey, he still looks pretty much exactly like the original 80s version did. He's not wearing leather pants or doesn't have a ponytail or anything like that. So that's cool to see. And when we flip to the inside, we see that the story is by Kevin Smith and Rob David. Revelation, originally, they described it as a continuation of the old Filmation show. Now I'm hearing it isn't, or it might not be. They're kind of flip-flopping on it. Kind of reminds me of how Bumblebee was a prequel to the Michael Bay Transformers movies, and then it wasn't. So who knows? Whatever you hear, don't get too invested in what you hear, because it can get just changed at the drop of a hat, depending on what people need, what the company needs. The dialogue here is really poetic. It's very verbose and not very 80s Filmation. So that's another reason, if you're really looking forward to the continuation of the Filmation series, I wouldn't. If the show is written, if the language in the show is anything like this, expect more of a spiritual successor to the 2000X show instead of the Filmation one, because some of this dialogue is very, very intelligent, very poetic, very heavy. So the Orlax shows up, this pink beast from Preternia. So again, they're taking bits and pieces of Masters of the Universe lore. Preternia, the Age of Hero. And King Randor ends up on his back there, poisoned, enchanted, something. He-Man draws a sword and the Orlax just disappears, which is odd. And so they take the king to Castle Grayskull, and just take a moment to appreciate some Castle Grayskull artwork, looking just like the classics Castle Grayskull toy. And they're trying to figure out what happened to King Randor. The sorceress fills them in and says the Orlax has met that blade before. We take a look at the Cosmic Corridor. So some elements from the Filmation show are in there, even though I'm personally not really looking at this as a continuation of the Filmation show. So He-Man is going to go back in time to the time of King Grayskull. So here is your new design, King Grayskull. And he is with his sons, Dare, I've always pronounced that Dare, who in one of the previous incarnations of Masters of the Universe, I believe Dare was King Adam's son, He-Man's son. And then the other son of King Grayskull is Ro, which I think is supposed to be short for hero. And this reminds me a lot of those Classics mini comics of where He-Man went back in time, and Mattel even made a Classics figure of Preternia He-Man in disguise. I believe it was a Matty Collector exclusive. So he watches on. There's Snake Mountain in the background there. And he watches on as the Orlax, which is the creature that attacked King Randor, attacks Dare. Appearance by the Snake Men here. So again, they're keeping the 2000X history of King Grayskull and the Snake Men. There's King Hiss right there. And King Grayskull's sword sort of kind of looks like the Sword of Power. And it's actually the sword of King Hiss. King Grayskull takes the sword to this guy who I just did a review on the Origins figure, Scareglow. Awesome to see Scareglow in something. So I guess he'll be in the Netflix series, but King Grayskull takes the sword to Scareglow, and this goes right back to the original He-Man figure and Skeletor figure from the early 80s, combining the two swords together. That is a really cool thing to see incorporated into the new Netflix series, because they left it out of the 2000X one pretty much. I mean, Skeletor had a sword that split in two, but it wasn't the Sword of Power. He-Man comes to King Grayskull's rescue, and one of the things about going through the portal is that He-Man is seeing things throughout time, not just one location and then back to his regular location. There is a nice little humorous moment that is similar to the old Filmation style of humor, where He-Man calls the monster the Orlax, and instead of, uh-oh, what have I done? I've disrupted the timeline. He-Man just, in his typical charming way, says, oh well, I guess it'll keep its name. Doesn't really sweat it too much. And here's a moment where He-Man sees something a little further down the timeline, and as he's traveling back to his own time, we see Ro here training with his sword, which mimics a scene earlier in the comic of Adam training with his sword with King Randor. And here we see Ro as Hero, a little more grown, and King Grayskull offering the Sword of Power to Hero. So we're tying together continuities here. The 2000X King Grayskull, the original, one of the final figures that was supposed to be made but was never made in the original late 80s, Hero. Cool to see all that stuff tied together. And we see Adam again with King Randor as He-Man is traveling back towards his regular timeline. And here's where the two halves of the sword come in. He-Man, when he was attacking the Orlax, got one of the tentacles off of it. And that tentacle ends up growing up into another full-sized Orlax. So the Orlax needs to be defeated in two different dimensions. So that's how that thing is able to exist in two different dimensions. And watching the whole thing as the heroes are discussing it is Skeletor, who no longer sounds like Alan Oppenheimer. Now he's going to sound like the Joker. Mark Hamill is voicing Skeletor in the new Revelations series. Another piece of beautiful toy artistry right here on the very back. Preview of issue 2's cover. Skeletor with the Havoc staff. Snake Mountain. Looking like the toy, actually. Never did on the show, but there's the head, the wolf head that you talk into, and the creepy monster face on the side of the thing. And He-Man standing atop the lava. And what else do we have in here? Some advertisements for some other Dark Horse comics. Interesting that there's no ads throughout the comic, actually. It's just the straight story throughout the comic. No ads for Bubblegum or Bonkers or anything like that throughout the thing. So that's Masters of the Universe, the prequel comic, issue number 1. And there's going to be 4 in total. Runs until October of this year, which is kind of... I always have trouble with that. I prefer to watch movies and TV shows that don't need things to fill you in. So many times I feel like I'm watching modern things and just totally lost. And then someone will write on the internet, oh, they did a prequel comic, or they did a prequel book you got to read. And I go, come on, just come out with that prequel stuff later, like years later, to fill that stuff in. Don't make the audience have to read this stuff. So hopefully this stuff isn't all that necessary. But I did want to go through this just in case it is necessary. And that first episode on Netflix is confusing. So maybe this will give you a better idea if you don't want to go and pick this comic up or don't want to read it. Maybe it'll just give you a general idea of what's going on. And it's also really weird that the prequel comic is going to be running before, during, and after, possibly after the Netflix series. Like the final issue of the prequel comic doesn't come out in October. So I don't know if the show is going to be all done by then. I don't know if they're releasing it weekly or if it'll just be all at once, so you can binge watch it. But there it is. Always cool to see more He-Man on the comic stands. Huge fan of He-Man, and looking forward to this show. And like I said earlier, continuation, not in my mind, not really. I can adapt pretty quick, usually within minutes. I can go, oh yeah, this fits in that continuity in my head canon, or no, this is a different thing. Move on, let it go if all of the ends don't perfectly match together, and just enjoy it for what it is instead of just disparaging it for what it isn't. So I hope you all enjoy that Masters of the Universe Revelation show as much as you can. And if I can track down the other issues of this series going forward, then I'll do some more flip through comic reviews of those too. Leave a thought in the comment spot, and to join the tribe, hit subscribe. Nerdmasté!